Naruto's an amazing show that a lot of people have grown up with, and it essentially was their childhood. Like, it's one of those shows that brought you on a trip with the characters where you experienced their highs and their lows with them. And it also had an excellent like power system that was just fun to like use. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone at some point in their life has knows what Naruto is, and they've even tried to make a hand sign, right? We all know what the system is, and I don't know. It's just fun to do, but at some point they just stop feeling like ninjas, right? And the series just kind of devolved. Like, I tried watching Boruto at some point, and I just couldn't do it because I saw that they were essentially just recreating the mistakes that they've made in the past. Like, for Naruto, I felt like the power ceiling is just so high that the adults have to be nerfed to make way for the new generation without it necessarily feeling earned. And that's a problem that's a problem that started to take root like as early as the first series, like even before Shippuden. Like, the series devolved into, who had the most broken jutsu and who had, the Akeke Genkai on their team, essentially. Because even in their world where chakra is everything, of course there are a couple exceptions like, Might Guy, Rock Lee, and even Sakura. I'm going to talk about her. Like, the series just devolved to like giant monster fights, kaijus, and essentially just characters not having any like weaknesses to be exploited besides, running out of chakra. But even then, that wasn't a problem because Naruto existed and he kind of like fixed that for everybody. So I don't know. Like, it was cool seeing the Sharingan like when it first appeared, but essentially everything just kind of revolved around who had the better eyes. The Byakugan became irrelevant, which is a shame because in my opinion, even to this day, I still believe that the Byakugan is one of the best eyes in the series. Well, at least one of the best powers in the series, and that wasn't really expanded on as much as its Sharingan counterpart, right? Because one thing that was separating the ordinary ninja in their universe from extraordinary ninjas was their ability to use Akeke Genkai, which we saw early on in the series when Kakashi got introduced with his Sharingan, and we saw Haku's Crystal Ice Mirrors later on. And Kakashi's speech about how in their world there are kids who are younger but also stronger than him. But no. Essentially, it's just Keke Genkai, broken jutsu, giant monster fights, kaijus, and even Gundam made its way into this show. Everything just started to feel inconsequential, and at some point, they stopped feeling like ninjas. It felt like there wasn't any stakes anymore because a character could just randomly have hacks, and that's it. Which really sucks because a lot of dynamics could have been in their fights that essentially just wasn't there just because of who these characters were. Like, I would say the most entertaining fights in the series were Shikamaru's fights because he's the only one that actually felt like a ninja throughout the series because he actually like used strategy and teamwork and the stuff you wanted to see. It was there. Shikamaru fights had everything. Like, all of his fights, him versus Tamari, like him versus Kaguya, him versus Hidan and Kakuzu with Kakashi and the rest of Inashikacho. Those fights were iconic for a good reason. And I mentioned before, characters don't seem to take damage like they should in this show anymore. I remember like at the beginning of the series when Naruto got poisoned, and that was kind of like a big deal. but he ended up just like cutting himself, getting the poison out. That felt like it had weight to it, and it was a big character moment for Naruto. But now that he's older, he's just taking like he's getting stabbed left and right, and it's not a problem because he's just gonna heal right up. And I felt like that's like a problem with healing in general, because it invalidated the one class that I want to talk about like today. Even though they're important, they're kind of invalidated, but they're not completely irrelevant. But we'll get to that. Like there's just no weight to their injuries. Even in like the Boruto episodes I watched, I was just so bored because I knew these kids weren't gonna, essentially they're untouchable. They have plot armor. Like you see like people taking Chidoris to the chest. You just see people taking Chidoris like it's nothing in the series. It's like inconsequential. Like in the old show, like Shippuden and the original Naruto, that attack actually had a lot of weight. And speaking of, you want to hear a joke? Want to know the quickest way to your lover's heart? A Chidori to the chest. This attack had a lot of weight whenever it was used, because whenever Kakashi started charging it up, you knew someone was gonna die, and then Sasuke got it and started spamming it. But yeah, every moment that he used it, it was just important in a way, because there was always the threat of Kakashi running out of chakra, which is kind of Sasuke's problem now. But hey, people were essentially just walking away from worse than this now. Like, it's not even a big deal like it was before. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, unless your name is Obito, like, okay, so, like, unless your name is Obito, it's just a flesh wound to you. Essentially. This is what the series turned into, where they can just do this and be okay. Like, for all intents and purposes, Kakashi won this fight here the moment he landed a hit on Obito's heart. The dude didn't have a heart, and he still managed to get up. What kind of BS is this? He should be dead. But we're gonna talk about how that's important as well. So, in their world, pretty much, I mentioned before, they don't feel like ninjas anymore, and it really sucks, because I felt like a key dynamic and a lot of tension just gets alleviated because of hacks like this. And the series is at a point where it's just, I feel like it's too far gone to be salvaged, but there's still a way they can do it. Like, for instance, like there was this whole thing in Boruto where, Boruto was cheating, and that was a big deal for the plot. But the whole thing was, I was looking at this piece of tech that they showed, and I was like, no way, they just have a wrist, like essentially just a wristwatch that completely invalidates the hard work it takes to, like, develop your own jutsu. Anyone can use a jutsu by, like, just strapping this thing on, and suddenly the bridge from the ordinary is just open for them to be extraordinary now. And I felt that was super unfair, which brings me to my point. There's one class in Naruto whose job I feel just can't be outsourced, at least not yet, and that is the medic, which I want to talk about. The medic is an essential part of any team, and low-key, actually not even low-key, high-key, flies under the radar for a lot of people. Take Demon Slayer, for instance. Without Lady Tamayo, like, no spoilers, of course, but without Lady Tamayo, the heroes would have 100% lost against Muzan Kibutsuji in the show. Like, the medic's importance just can't be understated whatsoever. They're just so important for any show. Hell, and even in One Piece, like Tony Chopper and Law both have their, like, parts to play that they haven't, they both have their parts to play. For Luffy, if the story is gonna go, or I think it's gonna go, in regards to Luffy and the consequences of what he's been doing, like that's been building up for years, he's gonna need doctors, and that's gonna be a huge point if it plays out the way I think it will. But so far, the medic in the show is the most overworked and underappreciated like class there is, and that's what I want to talk about. And you know, this is a video I don't know, just kind of got the idea to make, just to air out my grievances of this cool class with a lot of potential that just didn't get expanded on in the original Naruto or Shippuden. I hope they right that wrong in Boruto. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, we'll see. But it's interesting to think about, like, the entirety of Naruto, like Naruto's whole history in the show is just kind of like rooted in tragedy. And that was kind of, I don't know, it's weird going back and watching Boruto, and then the main complaint is that there's no conflict, and it's like, yeah, that's the point. They live in times of peace. But thinking back to the original series and the events that led up to, you know, the current age, it was like, it was a hellhole. Like their shinobi world, like essentially the main, like their whole thing, at least the founders, they wanted to fight for peace, right? Hashirama and Madara, they both have the same idea. It was just how they achieved their goals, like how they went about achieving their goals was completely different. Like with Madara decided to take a holistic approach to the world and essentially take away their choice with his Eye of the Moon plan to essentially save the world. Madara was a villain, but he wasn't a bad guy. Don't get me wrong, he's done terrible things, and his method was actually horrid for the people involved. But he was coming from a place where he actually meant to do well, to do the world good. And he's one of my top characters for his approach. But something I noticed, there was actually a parallel being drawn between Madara's approach, you know, Madara's ideology and Tsunade's. And looking back on their fight, I think, like, I don't know, it just wasn't, I don't know, maybe I was just reaching a little too far into it, but there are definitely parallels between Tsunade and Madara Uchiha and how they went about things. One who decided to just essentially just reject the world and just recreate it how he sees fit, essentially just giving people what they wanted, but it being rooted in a dream, which is the infinite Tsukuyomi, or at least that's what Madara thought it did, right? And then there was Tsunade, you know, the fifth Hokage, who essentially, like, is the GOAT of the series for a number of reasons, which I'll state during this video. But like, her whole origin is rooted, just like Madara, is rooted in tragedy, right? With the loss of her lover, and the loss, not just her lover, the loss of people close to her, such as her brother, and well, at least I think that was her brother and her lover. And she saw something wrong with the world, right? With their current system, and instead of flat out rejecting it, she accepted the reality of the situation and decided to take action to try and change it for the better, right? And how did she do that? She said, okay, too many people are dying. We need to do something about this. And I have a solution for it. And that was the eventual creation of the medical nin core, right? Which altered this, it altered the tide of battle because she was like, okay, there needs to be at least one medic to each squad, because if you have a medic, that's going to increase the survival rate of the people in the squad, right? And so she set out to train these medics herself. And they're pretty much, the medic in Naruto is actually the cream of the crop in regards to shinobi, right? They're everything you want a ninja to be. They're smart, they're evasive, and they're deadly when they need to be. These are the real ninjas of the show, right? Like, don't believe me? Alright. If there was no medic, if Rin didn't exist, how would Kakashi get a Sharingan? Right? And there's a point that's I'm gonna touch on with Obito, but that's gonna be later during the video. Right? No medic, no Kakashi of the Sharingan. In fact, Kakashi could even be dead. Right? The shoulder injury, he would have had a very tough time fighting if Rin didn't heal him there. Like, some of the things that I appreciate in Naruto, like I say this all the time, whenever I'm like reading something or watching something, I appreciate the small moments. And the moments where we see characters like actually train to get better at a skill. Right? And those small, it's like, I don't know, just those small little slice of life moments where we get to see the characters' efforts and we get to see them grow, right? And overcome their shortcomings. Like, I know it was filler, but some of the best, like, I don't know, some of the best episodes to me where we get to see them like take a break from combat and just hone their skills. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone remembers when Naruto was like trying to learn the Rasengan, right? And maybe even trying to recreate it yourself. But does anyone remember when Sakura was, learning medical ninjutsu from Tsunade? And seeing her like steadily progress from this small little fish to this big one? Heck, even Tenten went out of her way to like try and find her own like ninja way and her own style. Like, she even looks up to Lady Tsunade and wanted to perhaps learn medical ninjutsu herself, but she found out she really didn't have the aptitude for it, and eventually found her footing in becoming a weapons master. Which is a darn shame. We should have got more Tenten. Naruto's childhood swing got more screen time than Tenten. Heck, even Ino went out of her way to become better and learn medical ninjutsu so she could compete with Sakura. So, stuff like this, it's just awesome to see characters do this, right? Because it's small stuff like this that actually had a lot of weight, or at least it could have had a lot more weight in the series, because, people tend to focus on the action, but me, I'm the type of person that looks at what people are doing behind the scenes. I like to know the logistics of stuff, like. And I'm glad that we got to see it again during Boruto, when Sarada decided to try to pursue learning medical ninjutsu, because I was like, yes, these episodes are cool because they're expanding on something that we already knew existed, but we get to see it up close, Even if you don't get episodes of trading arc, that's fine. Like, simple stuff like how to close up a wound, right? Or, yeah, pretty much like how to close up a wound. And how to, give life into, like, how to breathe life back into, like, cells so, like, your flowers can bloom. Or practical stuff like how to separate, like, liquids from each other, which came into play like earlier during Naruto Shippuden, right? Like the scene where Sakura thought she separated the two liquids. Wasn't really her though, but yeah, it would have been nice to see Sakura I'm sorry, Sarada like progress as a medical ninja, but if that's not in the cards for her, I hope they take her character someplace interesting, right? Because it's already been shown that she already has excellent chakra control, because she has Sakura's monster strength as well. So, you know, it's perfectly reasonable if she eventually masters medical ninjutsu at some point. But as far as I know, she hasn't yet, so that's fine. And another thing, something I would have liked to see from the medics is their use of like actual like medicine. Like something I remember like from the early days of Naruto was Choji's like, what were they called? Medicine balls that gave him like, that pretty much like enhanced him and made him better. That was a really cool concept that I wish we got to see more of, but of course, naturally, Choji overcame his need for them, but the fact that they existed, I thought that was really cool. Like, alright, ninjas take supplements, like we know they have food pills. Heck, even Orochimaru's minions had like pills that could like advance his curse mark to the next stage. And, you know, based off of what we know from the show, when we find out what the curse mark actually is, it's basically just harnessing it's basically harnessing natural energy that's all around you. And that's essentially what Jugo's clan is, since he is the originator of the curse mark and where it comes from. So just small stuff like that, it's like, wow, how did he figure out how to do this? How did he figure out how to make this? What plant does it come from? These are the questions I wish characters in the show, and by characters I mean Sakura, asked and improved upon. But the medics are just underrated. Like we saw like during the show, like just how important they are during the war. Sure, it doesn't stick out a lot in people's heads because, you know, we tend to focus on the action and the main characters like, you know, Sasuke and Naruto, and we forget about that. Okay, to them, these are the people that they're trying to protect, because, you know, if Sasuke and Killer Bee didn't join the war, they 100% would have got smashed, like no question. And it's small stuff like this. I know these are filler episodes, some of them are at least, like it's small stuff like this that I actually like to see, like in the show, like ninjas actually doing their jobs, the medics actually treating the sick. Like at some point, Hinata even learned medical ninjutsu, apparently. I don't remember that in the manga, but apparently in the anime she knows it, so. Wait, if that's the case, why didn't she heal Neji? Maybe that's a plot hole, I don't know. But yeah, the medical ninja is just completely underrated and underappreciated in this show. Like even Shikamaru, when he got injured, if Sakura wasn't there, he 100% would have died. But people forget about that. And you know what? Sakura. You know, I have a different appreciation for this character now that I'm older, and I just kind of get it. I used to be like one of those people, like Sakura to me was she just had so much potential. And did she live up to her potential? No, not really, but that's not really her own fault. That's just more so Kishimoto not knowing how to write women, apparently. I guess, like when Naruto went down, Sakura, it was essential that Sakura was there, right? To keep him breathing. Like the part where she like dissected him so she can get inside of his heart, get to his heart and keep his blood pumping to keep him alive long enough for him to get to Obito and Kakashi to get to him and revive him. That was cool. I was like, okay, Sakura is being useful now. That's great. But it's sad that this character was just overshadowed, because what she could have been. You know what? We're gonna talk about Sakura. But this, like during the war effort, the smartest thing White Zetsu did was go for the medics, because if you don't have healers on your team, like, you're pretty much dead. Fatal wound, like, wounds that might not have been too bad are suddenly fatal because you don't have a medic now, right? No sensu beans for you. But let's talk about Sakura, the forgotten child of Kishimoto. Sakura was one of those characters that I absolutely hated in the beginning, but she showed all the signs that she would become just as excellent as Naruto and Sasuke, right? And to this day, she is excellent, just not in the way that we think of when we think of like our main protagonists over here, Naruto and Sasuke. Sakura most definitely blossomed in her own way. That, I don't know, it's just kind of underappreciated. Like, we've heard the memes, like, you know, Sakura's useless, she didn't do anything. That's how it is. If you've ever played League of Legends, that's normally how it is for the support. The support does no damage, GG report, you know? The support doesn't do their job. But the thing about that is Sakura did her job. She was actually shown to be like one of the most competent, you know, the most competent out of the three that were here, showing that she had excellent chakra control. And, you know, having excellent chakra control meant everything in the show, at least at the start, because you know, as Kakashi said, you know, if you can control your chakra, you can push the limits to any jutsu. And that's something I wanted to see from the show. I was like, okay, like, I'm on board the Sakura hype train right now. Maybe she's gonna become a, you know, an actual like useful character and come into her own. And, you know, she most definitely did, but she still is and has been overshadowed by Naruto and Sasuke, which is a shame to see, because originally, as far as classes go, I was like, okay, Naruto's clearly the bruiser tank, Sasuke's the assassin, and Sakura is gonna be the support, right? She's gonna be like the genjutsu specialist, because, you know, excellent chakra control and all that. You would think her specialty would be genjutsu, since those two specialized in taijutsu and ninjutsu. Nope, that's not where it went at all. Not at all. But when you think of underdogs, Sakura is actually one of those underdogs that doesn't get a lot of praise like she should, because she didn't really get like a big moment to herself in the same way that, say, Rock Lee got. Everyone remembers the Rock Lee fight with Gaara. He was iconic. That's to this day, that's still an iconic fight. And you could say that was the peak of Naruto. But Sakura, as it was shown during her fight with Ino, that they're very limited in what they can do, right? Like, compared to their predecessors. But the thing about that is how people praise Lee for being an excellent shinobi and building himself up from nothing or whatever, because he doesn't have chakra or whatever. Sakura has chakra, but Sakura pretty much did the same thing, but I don't hear that being widely praised. Think about it like this. Sakura is, the second disciple of Lady Tsunade. She got trained by a Sanin, and she learned the 100 healings technique. And she even, Tsunade didn't sit there and give her answers, right? Like, during the filler where we actually get to see Sakura, training with Tsunade, I thought that was great, and I felt like we should have saw more of that, right? I love training stuff. Tsunade didn't give Sakura answers. At least when Sakura came back from the time skip, from Naruto to Naruto Shippuden, I felt like Sakura off screen has made a lot of progression as a character, unlike Naruto, who only had to show a giant Rasengan for all those years, essentially just wasted. Then has the audacity to wonder why he he hasn't caught up to Sasuke yet. Sakura was a beast all on her own, and I wish a lot of like emphasis was placed on fleshing out her character, because even her motivation, at least at the very start, it was basically just to get some dick from Sasuke, right? But eventually that evolved from her fight with Ino to her wanting to become a strong Konoichi in her own right, and she accomplished that goal fabulously. Like, she came up with solutions to her own problems, like this one right here. Like, since Tsunade forbade her from like fighting, like there were these 3 rules that Tsunade came up with for the medical ninjas that Sakura had to follow. Basically, if you haven't mastered the one, like a medical ninja must be evasive. They can't get hit, because if they go down, the survival of their squad will decrease dramatically. And 2, like if they haven't mastered the 100 strength jutsu, basically the ability that gives Sakura like super strength by using her fine chakra control. If they haven't mastered that, then they can't fight at all. And if they haven't mastered the mitotic regeneration, they can't fight on the front lines either. But if they have mastered it, the 4th rule is that they can disregard the other rules. Sakura is the only one to have mastered both the 100 strength jutsu, the 100 strength jutsu, and the mitotic regeneration jutsu. And mind you, Shizune came before Sakura, right? Like even here, inside of her mind, where she's focusing, she's like, okay, if I keep 2 dams of chakra, I'll be able to perform surgery and participate in fights, right? And I wish this was shown a lot more, because slowly but surely, Sakura has been building her chakra and storing it over the years, just like Tsunade had done. You know, the groundwork had already been laid, but Sakura was never fighting at 100% because she couldn't afford to like use these chakra dams she's been building up all this time, which is insane to think about. Like, she reached her peak during the 4th Great Shinobi War, like at the very end of the series, where she could finally be as strong as, you know, Lady Tsunade. Hell, even stronger, I'd imagine. Oh, man, it's insane what these characters could have been. Like, sure, she got the super strength and all that, and it was shown that Sakura is highly intelligent. But I wish we saw more out of her intellect, or just intellect out of characters in general. Like, some of my favorite parts of the show were the rare occasions where they would do research. Like, it was fun seeing Tsunade in her element when she came back and she was figuring out how to essentially save Rock Lee's career by fixing both his arms and legs from what Gaara did to him during his fight. That was cool to see. Just seeing her, and it adds a lot to the world. It's like, okay, you see this character studying, meaning they don't have all the answers, but they have references that they can go off of to essentially perform a miracle. And that's, at least for the time, Rock Lee getting injured was a huge deal. And a lot of weight was placed on that and on Tsunade's shoulders to succeed in doing it. Otherwise, Lee couldn't be a ninja anymore. And let's bring it back to Shippuden. Like, with Kankuro getting poisoned by Sasori, and how much of a big deal that was, right? We got to see all the stuff that I showed before, like with how to separate liquids. That came into play when Sakura was healing Kankuro, right, by getting the poison out of him. And if you see what Sakura is doing here, that's a big deal, because you know how we spent a couple episodes with Naruto learning wind style, and how a lot of emphasis was placed on him learning chakra, what chakra natures was to advance to the next stage. Sakura is over here using water style. This is a water release, right? So off screen, this didn't seem like a lot, like very important at the time, but what this tells you is Sakura already knows the chakra natures, because one of my gripes was when Naruto was training to learn wind style, I was like, wait a minute, why isn't Sakura going over there and learning, at least trying to learn something with Naruto and figure out her chakra type and all that so she can progress and actually be useful? It's because Sakura already knew what that was. She already knew what her elements were and how to use them. Hers is earth style and it's water style, and she also specializes in yin yang release, which is, yin is what medical ninjas use to perform their healings and their surgeries, but yang release, when combined with yin release, is how you become an extraordinary medical ninja. And that's why Sakura had the potential to, inherit Tsunade's jutsu, is because she could do that. And it didn't come out of nowhere too. Like, we've actually seen Sakura actually has an affinity for yin yang release, because she was able to resist Ino's mind transfer jutsu during the tuning exams, which is a huge deal all on its own. Because once you get hit with that jutsu, it's essentially over for you. And for her to do that as, young as she was, that's pretty huge. So Sakura's feats just get underrated. They're just underrated in general. But yeah, her healing Kankuro was what I thought was the start of like major development for her character. And I felt like during the Sasori fight, like, it's something, how do I describe it? Like, the Sasori fight was what I wanted the series to be more of. Like, a lot of emphasis was placed on how Sasori's poison was a big deal, and if you even get a scratch on you, you're gonna die, like, straight up. But Sakura was able to get, not only extract the poison, but also come up with an antidote, right? And she even got praise from Lady Chiyo, because she said, oh, you remind me of Tsunade. She was so annoying during the Third Great War, because she was always like coming up with antidotes for my poisons, and Tsunade was considered to be like a miracle worker in her time, right? The greatest like medical shinobi to ever live, and here you have Sakura following in her footsteps and coming up with an antidote that's even more potent than Lady Chiyo's poison, with limited resources that they had. What did they have? Like 3 antidotes during the fight? Like, I don't think people think of that fight, right? And it's cool and all, but that was, in my opinion, that's one of the hardest fights in the show. Because imagine, if you get even a scratch on you, you're done. Unless you're Inosuke Hashibira from Demon Slayer, who has the immunity of a honey badger, you're not gonna last very long. But Sakura did, and she took multiple hits, right? But not without great effort. Like, thinking back to that fight, it was just overwhelming odds. And I think Sakura is the only one that could have done this fight outside of like Naruto by spamming shadow clones. Like, this was just the perfect setup. Now, which brings me to another thing. During the fight earlier, I can't place enough emphasis on how much of an impossible situation that this is. And mind you, this is during the last stage of the fights, where you have to fight, what was it, 100 puppets, or was it 1,000 puppets? Something like that, either 100 or 1,000. I think it was 100 puppets, yeah. I think it's 100, right? But before that, having to fight the Sand Village's, what is that, 4th Kazekaze or something like that? whose iron sand is also coated in poison. That's actually insane. Everything about this man is just poisonous, but she's the one that fought it. It's insane to see, and something I wish got expanded on was the I don't know, something I wish we saw more of is like two medical ninjas in combat, because when they fight, that was interesting to me. Like, take Shizune, for instance, when she got into it with Kabuto, and she had a jutsu that was, like, pretty much a poison cloud jutsu. We've never seen a jutsu like that again. Like, and I'm not even saying, like, it has to, like, revolve around poison. What I'm saying is, I wanted to see these medical ninjas, specifically Sakura, use their medical expertise to solve situations that would be like damn near impossible to solve without them, right? I want to see the value of having a medical ninja on their team. Sure, it doesn't even have to be poison. Like, even if she were to provide like different tools that she makes for the team, like an anesthesia bomb or something, anesthesia mist or whatever, that, you know, makes the opponents numb. Just something that provides like a status effect, like user, like you have in Pokemon, like, you know, sleep paralysis, stuff like that. But I don't know. When you see two medical ninjas going at it, in the case of Shizune versus Kabuto, that was cool to see, because you get to see their different approaches. Or even Kabuto versus Tsunade. That was hella interesting, and fights could have been so much more interesting if combat between ninjas like that just got expanded on, because you see how deadly they are. So it's cool that Sakura got the 100 healings jutsu, or mitotic regeneration, but I felt like it would have been better if she kind of just came into her own before she got that jutsu, because now I feel it just devolves into, oh no, I'm hurt, jutsu release, now I'm better and I don't have to worry about it because I have monster strength and, you know, an absurd and a huge chakra reserve that can rival tailed beasts. There's just no risk anymore. Which brings me to something else. Tactics, right? Sakura is awesome, right? But you get to see how reckless she got when she got this when she finally unlocked her mitotic regeneration jutsu, like Tsunade, and just, you know, charged forward thinking that she could, like, she was in the realm of gods, and she got slapped by Madara and put in her place. It was well deserved, right? By all intents and purposes, Sakura should have 100% died there. But Sasuke needs to reproduce, so that's why she kind of like lived. Something I would have liked to see before this happened is Sakura actually grow by like incorporating things that she's learned into her own arsenal. That way she would have felt like a very more rounded shinobi, right? Because you see Naruto's ingenuity quite frequently, like in his approach to things, and it would have been cool, like, even though Sakura wasn't born with, like, you know, being reincarnated from like Ninja Jesus, she still finds a way to come into her own by learning, which was cool in like the early series, because some of the coolest moments are when you see these characters like kind of just like take something and make it their own and improvise. Perfect example, Sasuke's Lion's Barrage, how he only like copied like half of Lee's like Hidden Lotus. Or later on when Naruto copies Sasuke by doing the Uzumaki Barrage. And stuff like that was amazing. Now, take Sakura for instance. She could have easily like learned something like Kabuto's mystical palm jutsu instead of just having Tsunade's monster strength, which I felt was very lazy, especially with a character like Sakura. Like, she essentially just turned into Tsunade too, right? But her having like a more methodical approach to a fight would have been a breath of fresh air, like our very own Shikamaru. Like, have it necessary for Sakura to be the one in the team that's actually analyzing the situation from a distance and not fighting on the front lines if she doesn't have to, and essentially just supporting and directing her squad mates on what to do and how to do it. Perfect example of that would be Karin in Sasuke's team, Team Taka. Karin was a perfect example of that. She was useful, she was resourceful, she was also the team's healer, she was also their censor. Karin was dope. And, you know, she didn't get any major fights, that's fine. She served her role just fine. But we've seen just how deadly, like, combat between medical ninjas is. Like, even when Shizune was fighting Kabuto, if you made contact with your body, something was getting destroyed inside you, which is something we've seen with the Hyuga clan as well. It was like his own bootleg version of the Gentle Fist, and it was cool. And speaking of, just Kabuto touching Naruto before, when he took that Rasengan to the chest for the first time, his palm just grazing against Naruto's chest sent him into cardiac arrest, and he 100% would have died if Tsunade hadn't intervened to heal him by performing surgery right then and there. So it doesn't take much for a medical ninja to kill you, especially with their expertise on the human body. That makes them a force to be reckoned with. And Kabuto's underrated. We saw Tsunade's mitotic regeneration and her being able to heal and continue to fight without hand signs, but here Kabuto is essentially doing the same thing before we even see her jutsu. No hand signs needed. That's him healing on his own. It's insane. So even before that happened, it would have been cool to see Sakura like make her own version of mitotic regeneration. But even then, not even that, because I felt like it'll probably take away from the moment. Something that would be even better is, say, you remember the fight with Sakura and Chiyo versus Sasori. Basically, something that took away from the fight, even though it was pretty cool how they did it, was Chiyo essentially controlling Sakura's movements with their chakra strings, which made me wonder, like, oh, so is Sakura not good at dodging on her own? It made me question, like, it took away Sakura's moment, be like, oh, she's a super evasive shinobi. But it had me questioning, okay, how much of that was Chiyo? Was Chiyo doing it the entire time or only during key moments? It turns out it probably was just the entire time. So that just kind of like ruined Sakura's validity in a sense. But what I want to say is it would have been cool for Sakura to incorporate things she's learned from other people into her fighting style, like the chakra strings thing. That's not a bad idea for Sakura to even have, right? And it would be perfectly aligned with her learning it as a respect for Lady Chiyo, right? And it would be easy for Sakura to learn it because of her amazing chakra control, right? Sure, she wouldn't be using puppets like puppet masters, but imagine her doing that to coordinate with her team, and her playing the role of a medic who's supposed to be sitting back and analyzing the situation and coordinating and supporting her team as needed. If she had chakra threads on them, that would be an easy task for her, and that's something I wish that she would actually have learned, right? Because that's also a utility move as well, as we saw Lady Chiyo place a chakra string on Sasori's puppet to change the tide of a battle. That's super useful, and it's perfectly in line with Sakura learning that. It's just small stuff like that, like her incorporating things that she's learned to make herself a better shinobi and kind of like move out of Lady Tsunade's shadow a bit instead of being Tsunade too. Because if she wasn't gonna learn genjutsu, like, she could have been a lot more resourceful than what she was, in my opinion. Because we've seen like some of the cool things like characters could do with chakra threads. She could like immobilize a target, like here too in one of those Naruto fillers, and immobilize their movements if she doesn't want to control movement. There's just so many things she could do with them. Or she could even do what Tsunade did and do a change in nature to send her chakra through a person's body as electricity and mess up their signals. We never saw that happen again when Kabuto was trying to like move his arm and his leg would move, and you know, all of his brain signals were just jumbled, and he was just like a writhing mess. That was super cool, and a super use of using like medical expertise to turn the tide of a fight. That would be something that would have been excellent to see, but instead it just devolved into just, you know, Sakura punches really hard. Right? Man. And that brings me to another wasted character. Hinata Hyuga. Hinata's a freaking boss. I love Hinata. And she didn't get as much character development as she should have. Actually, that's not true. She didn't get her moments to shine like she should have. That wasn't in filler. Right? Like, wasted potential. Like, if anyone should have learned medical ninjutsu, it should have been Hinata, because it makes perfect sense. She's a Hyuga. Like, her chakra control is on point, right? And she even has the kind-hearted nature. She even has that kind-hearted nature and aptitude for it, as we've shown when Naruto was injured after his fight with Kiba, and she gave Naruto a healing bomb, which showed, oh, she actually like researches different plants and she made it herself, right? That made all the sense in the world. And what would separate her from the ordinary and make her extraordinary is her aptitude for it and her Byakugan, right? I said it and I'll say it again. The Byakugan is one of the best eye techniques in the series because of how deadly it is in the right hands, right? You can see a person's chakra network, right? Sure, the Sharingan can kind of like make it out and you can see the flow of chakra, but the Byakugan can see everything. Every single chakra node in your body, it can see it all. You can't hide from this. And we've seen it here during the fight with Neji versus Hinata versus Neji rather. And how like ridiculously strong like the gentle fist is. It goes back to what I was saying with Kabuto's mystical palm technique. It's basically just a bootleg gentle fist. Like, what makes the Hyuga clan so deadly is essentially that jutsu right there, because they don't rely on the strong fist like Rock Lee and Might Guy does. They don't break bones. They break you from the inside. Just in the same way that Kabuto like tore up Naruto's organs, the gentle fist does the same thing, and it makes them even more deadly. It's because they know precisely where to hit you, and if you turn off the wrong chakra point, you're gonna die. Really. Like, they have the ability to either increase the flow of chakra through your chakra nodes or completely sever it. That's what makes the Hyuga clan deadly. And we even seen it during this episode. They did Naruto dirty in the show by doing this during the day he became Hokage. Absolutely ridiculous. But that just goes to show how strong this ability is for even Naruto to get one-shotted by hitting a major point, by hitting a major chakra point in his body, to just get one-shotted. That's absolutely insane. And to go back to the Byakugan, something that would like if Hinata had went down the path of becoming a medical ninja, she's been gimped by her own clan because they wanted her to exclusively focus on the Hyuga's techniques. But if she went down that route, she would be an absolute monster. Don't believe me? Let's go to Baki real quick. If you've never read Grappler Baki, you should. It's absolutely insane. But there's this character there named Yujirohama, who's considered the strongest, the strongest creature alive. I would have been doing him disrespect by calling him a man. But essentially, what really makes Yujiro deadly, as it was, besides his, imposing figure, deadly techniques, at least in my opinion, what really makes Yujiro scary is his ability to see weakness, right? Here, let me read this passage for you. And by reaching a level no one else is on, inside his body a special ability was born. All who came into his sight, he was able to see all of their weaknesses, from small cancer cells people themselves weren't aware of yet, the decaying tooth they have yet to discover. Time without fail, he can spot all of their vital points. All of it jumps into this man's eyes. Does that sound familiar? That sounds like something we already know, right? That ability is absolutely insane. Now put that into the hands of someone who wants to save your life. It's an amazing tool for good, but unfortunately, this ability is in the hands of someone who can very well easily take your life, and because of it, he knows the exact means to hurt you. It's absolutely insane to think about that. And it's also a point that's also brought up in Demon Slayer as well. If you've never read the series, I highly recommend it. I'm not going to spoil too much, but the main antagonist in that series is Muzan Kibutsuchi, who's an absolute monster in the show. Like, the entire reason the Demon Slayer Corps exists is to kill this man, and out of everyone, only one person has come close to putting the fear in Muzan to the point where he won't even interact with the Hashira anymore, and that is Uruiji, who just so happens to have had the ability to see inside of people, right? The ability to see, literally, anyone who he's come in contact with, like their internal organs, right? And with that, he was able to see that Muzan had 7 hearts and 5 brains. But he was also able to notice the nuances, in someone's breathing, or, there's... What I'm saying is, this ability is broken is because it gives you access to information that you wouldn't have had otherwise. By being able to see, a person's, musculoskeletal structure, that gives you an edge that you wouldn't have had, because, you can tell where someone's gonna go, by the direction their feet is pointing. But imagine if you could see where their muscles, you would know which leg and how much power they were gonna use, and, how how exhausted they are. And they're just things you can do when you have this level of information. Now, if you put that into the hands of a trained medic, they would be an absolute monster. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, the strongest abilities are actually strong medical abilities, right? Because in Demon Slayer, this ability is the peak, really. Outside of sun breathing, this is actually the real broken ability. Without it, how would you know where to cut? How would you know where to kill this guy? Right? How would you know how to fight this? You wouldn't. So I think it's kind of ironic in a sense. So back to Hinata. She's a genius in her own right. She came up with her own jutsu, which is the protective 8 trigrams 64 palms, which is essentially just her releasing chakra from her fingertips into a fine blade, and using that for defense, essentially. Defense and offense. To slice people to slice anything that comes inside her radius to pieces, which is absolutely broken. But again, it's funny to think about this because we've actually seen this ability before in a more offensive jutsu, the Rasen Shuriken, which was labeled a forbidden jutsu, and Naruto's only able to do it because he mastered Sage Jutsu, which protects him, and has Kurama Cloak and all that, and that protects him as well. But this is a jutsu that destroys you on a cellular level, right? Which makes it especially deadly because not only does it destroy your cells, it also has it can also disconnect your chakra, the tubes that lead to your chakra network, and essentially if you get hit by this, or if you suffer damage from this in any way, you're not going to be able to use jutsu ever again because your cells don't have access to their chakra supply. So essentially, this was a career-ending jutsu, both for Naruto and his opponents, until he found a workaround to continue using it. And how ironic is it that Naruto's strongest and essentially the deadliest jutsu in his arsenal is something you would expect a medic to have, right? Someone like Hinata, essentially. Which I believe this is kind of like the precursor to that, but how ironic is it that Naruto has it, of all people? But yeah. So you remember Haku? Haku was a beast all on his own until he took a Chidori to the chest. But something I thought was cool about Haku was his he had a very methodical approach to his fights. Like, the only reason Naruto and Sasuke are still alive and why we have a plot is because Haku wanted them to be alive, essentially. This here is where their lives should have ended and the story of Naruto should have been over. But Haku was a good guy. So, Sasuke ended up walking away from this somehow, even though he fell backwards, and look at where the spikes are. Plot armor. The plot armor is strong with this one. He should 100% be dead. But hey. But when he's not being a nice guy, we've seen just how deadly Haku can be, right? Because he knows exactly where to hit you, right? He knows all the vital points, all the weak points in the human body. Like, he trained as a hunter nin, which is something I wish got expanded on more for Shinobi who goes rogue. I wish we saw more hunter nin in the series because the concept is actually pretty interesting. But yeah, Haku was a force to be reckoned with. And essentially he had unlimited ammo due to his Kekkei Genkai, and the speed, you can't deal with Haku. Essentially, if you're hitting him, it's because he wants you to hit him. Or he's getting tired or something like that. But absolute boss. And if he had stayed alive, it would have been interesting to see where he would have went as a ninja. Like, this is a person who is perfectly suited to learn medical ninjutsu. And I'm pretty sure he would have if that was in Zabuza's range of expertise, but sadly it wasn't. But the medics don't get a lot of praise, like, at all. Everyone has a super healing ability now for some reason. Because moments like this, like, people were upset that Neji died the way that he did, which was really ridiculous. In my mind, Neji died a long time ago. He died right here. Neji should have died right here. Like, imagine a scene like after the Sasuke retrieval arc. This was really cool to see because, this is their way of performing surgery to save Neji's life. This was awesome. This was an awesome scene because I felt like it added a lot to the, the world and how they do things. But in my opinion, Neji should have died right here because even though he was alive, his character had nowhere to go. He completed his arc, and all his death served to do later was to get Naruto and Hinata together, which is a real shame for an amazing character. But the characters in the series would have absolutely been screwed without the medical ninja. Take Gaara, for instance, when he had Shukaku extracted from him. Lady Chiyo gave her life to revive Gaara, right? And she was a goner anyway from the poison that Sasori had put in her. Well, from the fight with Sasori, but no Chiyo, no Gaara. Right? Even Sasuke had his moments where he needed a healer. And thankfully Karin was there, because there were situations where Sasuke 100% should have been dead. But he had a healer on his team. Or take this scene when Lady Tsunade got split in half by Madara before he was on his merry way to go meet up with his boyfriend. Right? 100% should have been dead. And once again, who saves the healer? Who saves the medic when they go down? Another healer. Perfect example right here. Karin coming in clutch again. Heck. And Tsunade... as Hokage, she did what she was supposed to do. She stayed in her lane, right? Because there was no way she was gonna win a fight against Pain. No way in hell. Her priority was to save as many villagers as she could, and she did her job. Like, we saw the result of that. Her transferring her chakra to Lady Katsuyu, the summon slug, to heal ninjas across the village. And that was really cool to see Tsunade do, and I thought that was a very creative use of her ability, right? And there are times where in the series where we wish the medics could have saved someone that we knew. Take Ino trying her best to heal Asuma, only to find out that it's too late. Hidan's attack was fatal, and there was no coming back from that. It was, that's a sad scene because of the way, like, you have all this power in your hand, the power to save someone, only to find out that you can't do it. That's the dilemma I wish we saw more of in the series. Like, there are characters that absolutely should have died with respect in the show. Like, instead of them being, hacked back to life. For instance, Guy Sensei 100% should have died during his fight with Madara, and the fact that he's still alive takes a lot of weight off of his sacrifice. So that's just one thing. Yeah, that was bullshit. I'm actually a little bit salty about that the more I think about it, but yeah. You, like, another instance. You remember when Sasuke got his chest blown out by Killer Bee's lariat? This is what it looked like in the manga. Like, you actually see, like, his rib cage. Like, he completely has this, like, thoracic cavity just completely destroyed. Like, there's a hole in his chest. Like, Sasuke 100% should have died here. There's no walking away from that. But Pax, Jugo was there. And it makes sense because it was established earlier that since Sasuke was compatible with the curse mark, who Jugo is the originator of, that he was able to infuse, like, his own flesh to Sasuke and repair his body that way. And repair his vital organs. So that made sense. It kind of sucked to see, but hey, it worked. Right? Or take the instance where Sasuke launched a raid on the 5 Kage summit. Who ended up patching him up so he can go fight Danzo? Karin. Without that, Sasuke 100% would have died. Or even the minor flesh wound that Madara gave Sasuke, you know, just a sword stab through the chest. Nothing he can't walk away from. Nah, Sasuke was 100% gonna die here. But Kabuto, being the absolute beast that he is, also underrated, was there to save his life. And Kabuto being there is the whole reason why Madara didn't win at all. And why, actually, yeah, Kabuto's both the reason. Kabuto's a reason for a lot of things, man. But him being there, essentially, what I'm trying to say is, he was essential to turn the tide of the war in their favor by reviving Sasuke. Right? Even Sakura had her uses. Like, people forget, like, Naruto wasn't always perfect with the Kyuubi inside of him. Like, whenever he would have a fit and transform into, like, the Four Tails or whatever, his skin would actually, like, peel off because Kurama's chakra was like a toxin to him, and it would destroy his cells. And there was even a threat on Naruto's life because it's like, oh, he heals really fast, but it's been stressed that, you know, the cells can only regenerate so many times, and eventually that's gonna put too much stress on his body and kill him. You know, sure, he has, you know, Uzumaki lineage, so he heals super fast. So Sakura really wasn't needed here, but it was the thought that counted. And that brings me to Kimi Maru. Kimi Maru was one of those characters that had a lot of depth to him, and I wish we saw more of him, especially for how important that his clan turned out to be later. The Kaguya clan with their corpse bone chain kick at Genkai, which is the ability to manipulate his osteoblast and osteoclast to, you know, create bone. That it's bone manipulation is what I'm trying to say. He can manipulate the bone density of his body and apparently where he produces bone at. So yeah, Kimi Maru was an absolute monster, and it's a shame that this man was sick and he died of tetanus. He died of tetanus. That's my diagnosis based on how he died and his disease. I'm pretty sure it was tetanus. So if Kimi Maru wasn't sick, Rock Lee and Gaara 100% would have died right here. And it's a shame when the strongest characters are often defeated by illness, right? And that's what makes Kabuto and Orochimaru so interesting. I think we're going to talk about them next. So, just to see these guys in their element, like seeing Kimi Maru here before when he was sick, and it's a terrible sight, but I wish we saw more of stuff like this. Like more of characters in their element and doing research, because this was a scene where, you know, even though his condition wasn't stable, they needed him to like get up and fight. And Kabuto pretty much pumped Kimi Maru full of drugs and whatever else he could do to buy Kimi Maru enough time so he can complete the job and get Sasuke to Orochimaru. So something I wish was explored was the ethics of being a medical ninja, which makes me wish we got more episodes of, well, we got episodes in general of Kabuto. Because we don't really get to learn about Kabuto until like later on in Naruto Shippuden. We don't get to learn what drives that guy at all. And even Orochimaru has subtle moments of like characterization that you don't really get to learn the extent of. But what I'm saying is characters are at their best when they're doing research, and that's something I love to see during the show. Like, take for instance the autopsy on the Pain body, something that Jiraiya like literally risked his life to get, to make sure that the Leaf had a fighting chance. Like, he managed to take down a Pain and send it back. And one of my favorite episodes well, not favorite, one of the most interesting episodes to me is when they were actually doing the autopsy on the body so they can figure out, okay, how does this guy work? What's his deal? Right? Because something I mentioned before, the Hunterman thing, and why I wish that got expanded on, because we never saw Hunterman again, like in the series. Because Kakashi explained when a ninja goes rogue, Huntermen are dispatched after them because a ninja's body is valuable. It's a source of information. Like, you can learn another village's secrets and via, the types of medicines that they used on the body. There's just so much information inside of a body. And you see that Tobirama Senju, the second Hokage, realized that as well, which is why he kept Madara's body alive instead of cremating it, essentially, because it was important to study it and understand the mechanisms behind the Uchiha Sharingan, right? And also fueled his racism against them and against the Uchiha clan and all that. But yeah, information is power, and that's something I wish we got to see Sakura do, actually be a ninja and gather information about targets and whatever, or even see her in autopsy rooms and shit like that. So information is power. And during the war, I thought it was cool that Sakura and Shizune were the ones to be examining White Zetsu and figure out how this guy worked, because before that, Zetsu was wreaking havoc on the Shinobi Alliance. I know the war was over in only 2 days, but it would have been cool if it would have gone on longer. It would have been cool to see Sakura and Shizune come up with countermeasures for the Zetsu and how to deal with them, be it with a new poison that only affects them, a medicine, all because they have the Zetsu's body right here. They're like, wait, he's plant-based, but he's also has human cells. What's going on with this guy? Right? It's just interesting to think about. I love when characters sit down and they do research and think through a problem and come up with creative solutions, which is what I feel like, Sakura should have been, especially combined with Tsunade and Shizune. It could have just brought a whole different dynamic to the show and how they played fights out. Because Shikamaru did his research before he went to go fight Hidan and Kakuzu. And that was one of the most entertaining fights in the series. But yeah, characters, I love characters who are in their element when they're doing research, and it's a shame that, as I said before, the strongest characters are the ones that eventually succumb to illness. Itachi Uchiha was an absolute monster, but for the sake of the plot progressing, in a way that was entertaining, he absolutely had to die because he was just too strong. Otherwise, you would have had the Madara dilemma. The entire reason that Boruto exists right now is because the author couldn't find a way to kill that guy. He could not find a way to kill Madara. So he got this convoluted way he had to go out, because otherwise he was untouchable. At least Itachi had an out. He was always meant to die. That was his whole character. And that brings me to Orochimaru. This dastardly... Orochimaru. One of my top favorite characters. This dastardly villain. You never know what this guy is going to do next. That rascal. Orochimaru is just a treat every time he's on screen. And he should have been the end boss. He should have been the main villain of the series. He should have stayed that way. But he just wasn't, because the Uchiha just have to dominate everything, I guess. Uchiha politics is what the show turned into, really. But Orochimaru's motivations were completely understandable, and his means were atrocious. and I love him every second for it. But even a villain such as Orochimaru manages to get sick too. Like that time he got leprosy. That was pretty crazy. Like when he couldn't use his arms and he had to like swap into a new body, but he still couldn't use jutsu. That was great to see. And if he hadn't had Kabuto there, I believe Orochimaru would have 100% died. Orochimaru, his aspiration is immortality, but he himself is not immortal, right? As much as he wants to be, even though that's his goal. And I said it before, Orochimaru is a character that was way ahead of his time. You know, he's somewhat of a scientist himself. He's an excellent character. And there's a lot of subtle characterizations with him. Like, I love seeing Orochimaru in his element, being an absolute bastard. Like, take for instance, the hundreds of, like, he was a scientist. He even said it, like, for every new jutsu, the price to pay for that was like he'd have to go through hundreds of bodies to develop a brand new jutsu, right? But that changed when Kabuto got introduced to the mix and became his assistant, and he found that, oh wait, with Kabuto I can use the same body hundreds of times, which significantly sped up his research. And sure, this is actually horrible to see. Just look at the scene right here. That's terrifying and unsanitary. But just seeing this, I would have liked an episode, at least one episode, to show Orochimaru's method and what he's really working toward and why he's doing it. I mean, sure, we know why. It's because essentially he was afraid of death, right? He's seen the pain that death causes, and he didn't want to die like that, and he wanted to find a way to extend his life so he can continue his research on jutsu, right? And when I say Orochimaru was ahead of his time, everything that's happening in Boruto right now with the Otsutsuki and all that, Orochimaru saw that coming from a mile away, which makes perfect sense that he would want a body, a pretty much an everlasting body, right? So he can continue to research and fight or do whatever he wants, essentially, and just live his life. Like, I had a theory that Orochimaru may be an Otsutsuki himself, but that's highly unlikely. But he was just ahead of his time. Like, they even said it, like Kabuto even said it, like, oh, him and Orochimaru figured out the secrets of the Rinnegan a long time ago without even seeing the Uchiha tablets, you know, the hidden Uchiha tablet. And that was just through, like, his own curiosity and ingenuity in developing these techniques. That's cool to see, even though it's absolutely terrible what he does. But he was a scientist. But yeah, his whole body snatching thing, that's what the Otsutsuki are doing right now in the Boruto anime. That sounds like, when I thought about it, I was like, wait a minute. So this is just, they're basically doing what Orochimaru was doing, like, the whole time. So yeah, Orochimaru is very much ahead of his time. He's a brilliant shinobi, but just like Sakura, he doesn't get a lot of time to shine. And I felt like Orochimaru 100% is underutilized. Maybe that changes in Boruto since he's still around for some reason, despite all his war crimes and, you know, killing children and all that good stuff. But yeah. Now, we're almost done. Something I want to talk about. The major contribution to the major contributions that the medical ninjas of the series made has to do with Hashirama Senju. You know, Hashirama is known for his wood style, right? That's like his defining that's pretty much what defined Hashirama Senju. That's what people think about. They're like, oh, the first Hokage, he was a wood style user, he grows trees, which is essentially what built the Hidden Leaf Village, which is why Yamato was so valuable, not just in suppressing the Nine Tails, it was actually in reconstruction. Whenever the village gets destroyed, Yamato could just make new trees, right? And that's what made Hashirama valuable. And also taming the tailed beast, but what really made Hashirama as strong as he is his body, which everyone wants a piece of, especially his boyfriend Madara. Everyone and their mother wants Hashirama's man meat. Madara actually managed to get a piece of that meat himself, ingesting his boyfriend and regurgitating him so he can do with it as he pleased, right? With Hashirama's with a piece of Hashirama's tissue that he bit off, he was able to cultivate it into Zetsu clones. Cultivated into Zetsu, right? So Hashirama's cells were essentially integrated into this guy. Granted, Madara wouldn't know that it was actually black Zetsu that was pulling out the white Zetsu from the statue, but Hashirama did 100% Madara did 100% integrate Hashirama cells into Zetsu, which has life-changing applications for characters now, which is insane to think about. A lot of this, it's funny how the biggest contribution came from Madara and Obito. Well, really Madara. When we put it like this, here, let me explain. So you see these Zetsus here? They're compatible with Sakura. When Sakura and Shizune were, dissecting that clone I showed earlier, that Zetsu, they found out the mechanism in which Zetsu can just take the form of anyone. He also mimics the chakra signature, right? And it turns out that Zetsu is also, it's made of Hashirama cells, which gives him the ability to use the wood style. But since he's made of Hashirama cells, that also makes his body quite resilient, and he has a lot of vitality as well. And I said it before, Orochimaru's body hopping, he has no need to do that anymore because his body is made out of Hashirama cells now. He's essentially in a Zetsu body. He doesn't need to eat or drink. He doesn't need to do anything anymore because of that body's amazing vitality. All he needs is sunlight to survive. He's a plant now. It's crazy. The applications for it is absolutely insane. It kept Madara alive. He made a life support for himself to connect Zetsu roots to the Ghetto statue to sustain himself. Madara was very much someone, he was something of a scientist himself as well, which was awesome to see. His whole plan with this dude is underrated, in his intelligence. People give Madara credit for being the smartest person in the show, but Madara, even though he was a detriment to society, he actually ended up contributing in a way that was super relevant for the story. Let me explain. So you remember this scene right here? When Obito got slightly grazed by a boulder? The only reason why Obito is still alive is because of the prosthetic application of white Zetsu cells cultivated from Hashirama, right? If Obito died, Madara's plan wouldn't have, Madara was donezo. At any point if Obito died, his plan, he wouldn't have got as far as he did, and we wouldn't really have a plot, now would we? No Obito, no Nine Tails attack, right? And the real application for, Hashirama cells is the prosthetic purposes. Look, this guy didn't have arms or legs. They were crushed. One half of his body was completely useless. But not anymore. in just a few months, like this guy was up and moving and walking again, and he was able to go through rehabilitation. That's absolutely insane, because from what we know before, look at him, he's healthy. From what we know before, that was a life-ending injury that you had to get the best. Like, remember this? What Rock Lee had to go through? This was a life-ending injury right here. A career-ending injury that you had to get the best medical ninja in the world to get, to heal you. But here we are years earlier, and Madara essentially just has the solutions to problems like that, like right here. If you really think about it, it's absolutely insane to think about that whole side. And sure, it enhanced Obito a lot by giving him the ability to use the wood style, but what really is impressive is Obito really doesn't need to eat or drink, or he doesn't require sustenance like he would a normal human, because he can easily just be sustained by Hashirama cells. It's absolutely insane. Like, we saw how far he got when he was missing a heart. He 100% should have been dead right there when Kakashi lightning bladed him, but no, he was able to persevere and survive for a little bit longer due to these cells and the vitality that they gave him. And hell, even I have a lot of respect for Sasuke due to the fact that he didn't get a prosthetic. He did not, he refused it. Naruto ended up getting a prosthetic arm, but Sasuke refused it. He took his L, right? But essentially, Madara just inadvertently eliminated consequence. Sure, it was Tsunade who came up with the idea to use the Zetsu clones for, to use the Hashirama cells to make prosthetics. I'm pretty sure Sakura had a lot to do with that as well, since she made the discovery with Shizune. But it's insane to think about how a huge consequence of these two fight just got negated by medical science. This is why I love medical ninjas. They're just, the ingenuity of this is insane to me. Like, can you imagine? Like, take Full Metal Alchemist for instance. Can you imagine Edward Elric not being able to clap his hands together properly, or can you imagine him limping across the country with just an arm, one arm and one leg? No, he needed people on his team, and him not having an arm was a huge deal, for the plot, both beginning and end, from when he lost it to where he finally got it back. Which is why, you need a medic, you need a mechanic, or you need a medic in your corner to fix you up whenever you get busted up like this, And I feel like Winry doesn't get a lot of credit where credit is due, because without Winry, there is no show. Really. Who would fix Ed then? As good as she's been doing, right? Every time he gets hurt, she fixes him up. Good as new. So that's the real contribution of medical ninjas in general. They're so abundant. There's just no consequences anymore. They're so abundant, you could literally lose an arm, kick it at somebody, and have a new one by the next day. They just don't care. It's absolutely insane. At least it felt like there was some stakes. At least they had to go find Data's arm when Kakashi Kamui'd it off, and you actually had to get Kakuzu specifically to fix it for him. But yeah, and you see the result of how technology progressed, especially medically with the prosthetics. Sure, maybe the Hashirama cells are reserved for special people though, but the applications for that is still absolutely insane. Sure, you can recreate a limb, given some time, but think about it like this as well. You can also do plastic surgery. You can replace the epidermis, the outer layer of the skin. You can replace an eyeball. You can even replace someone's heart. If someone needs a heart transplant, you can do that. Medical ninjutsu using those cells is absolutely insane. And I felt like that's and strangely, it's one of those things I don't have a problem with, because it's a natural progression of things we've already seen in, what we already knew. We already knew the first Hokage had amazing vitality. And it turns out he's descended from, Ninja Jesus as well. As well as him, Madara, Naruto, and Sasuke. Descended from Ninja Jesus, essentially. So, yeah, that makes sense. Because both Hashirama and Madara were ninjas that you wouldn't see again, that you see once in 100 years or something like that. So it makes sense that they were strong like that. And based off of what we know about Hashirama being descended from Ashura, who inherited the sage's body, perfect sense. But yeah, the medical applications of having those cells is just absolutely insane. And we even see it, the idea, being transferred over, with ninja tech in general, is just, the foundation's already been laid. So yeah, man, medical ninjas are just freaking awesome. And just because they don't fight a lot of their contributions just kind of get overshadowed and looked over. So I don't know, I just thought I'd bring a lot of light to this underrated class in the show. People just losing arms left and right. There was a point in the show where Madara lost his arm when he was fighting the tailed beast. And what does he do? He ends up lopping. Oh no, Sasuke actually used the Amaterasu, and it hit Madara's arm. So what does he do? He just lops it off and summons a Zetsu and just takes his arm, and it's yeah, I'm whole again. That's nuts. And we're seeing the same thing play out again, even though Naruto's supposed to be armless. So at least it's kind of bullshit, but it makes sense based off of what we know. So yeah, man, that's the end of my long-winded rant. So yeah, medical ninjas are underappreciated, and I really, really hope that we get some expansion on that class in the Boruto anime, because Naruto and Naruto Shippuden kind of missed the mark with that. But hopefully, they get redeemed, and they get expanded and make medical ninjas awesome. Let them shine. That's all I want. But no medical ninjas, no show. No Naruto, no Sasuke, no Kakashi, no nobody. Medical ninjas are awesome, and they deserve a lot of respect on what they get, especially Sakura. She's not useless. But that's the end of my rant. Hope you enjoyed.